first season of the Resurrectionists podcast. We are joined today by the one and only VangelinaSkov, my dearest friend and not expert in bones in any way whatsoever, which is what makes it perfect.
I don't know if a femur is in the arm or in the leg, but it's one of them. So
you know, 50-50 chance. 50-50 chance. You've
Out of
narrowed it
curiosity,
down.
which is it?
It's the leg.
The leg. Okay.
I thought you were joking.
I couldn't remember. I know you've told
me.
It's
the big one in your leg.
It could be the big one in your arm.
That's your humerus.
Funny bone. Okay. I get it.
I was going to say, and how I remembered that was it's connected to your funny bone, which isn't actually a bone, but yes.
Like the foot. Okay, we will get into the proper structure of the questions, but this might be my first question. What do you mean the funny bone is not a bone?
It's like there's no bone that is a funny bone. Your elbow is like where your humerus connects to your radius and your ulna, and your radius and your ulna are the long ones in your forearm. So there's no like little bone that's a funny bone. I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure when like the sensation that people say is your funny bone is actually like one of your nerves like getting compressed when you like hit your elbow or something.
Well, I just need to tell you that I hate that information. Everything's a lie. So, well, I have many questions for you, by the way. Many questions that are all equally
that is the
stupid.
whole point.
Yeah. But I do want to say thank you for letting me do this, because I think this is going to be really fun. I'm really excited to like ask all my ridiculous, idiotic follow-up questions that I'm probably going to have. And also, congratulations on the end of the season.
Thank you. It nearly killed me towards the end there.
It's okay. You can take a break.
We made it! You know, there's a really toxic part of my brain that goes, wow, my views are doing well recently. Maybe I should keep this on.
That's your influencer brain. It happens to all of us. Except I hit this annoying part of influencer brain where my brain does the opposite. Oh, this is doing well. I can stop.
Aim to be that level. And
you shall. You just need enough time, enough
you need to wear your brain down enough.
Yeah. You should do stuff that doesn't involve like using your brain, actually. I think that would be helpful. So no more bones, because that is actually information. Do you want me to start asking you the questions that I have?
Go for it.
Some of these are from your viewers, some are from me, some are from people on my Instagram who know you anyway, so also your viewers. So let's see. How often would you find bones or pieces of bones that you can't actually identify at all?
Fairly often, depending on how well preserved the grave is, or like wherever you're getting the bones are from, I guess. So like usually it would be bits of bones, not like bones you can't identify. Like if you had a hole of a bone, you'd be able to identify it. Even if like it had something weird going on pathologically, you'd still probably be able to identify it. But if you get like little fragments of bones, they can be difficult to identify. You might not be able to identify them, especially like the smaller they get, the harder it is to identify them. Or like you could get a big bit, a decent sized bit of a long bone, but long bones like are long and straight. So unless you get a bit that like has something identifiable on it, you just say it's like a long bone fragment. But that would depend on like how fragmented the person was in the first place. So like if the grave was in good condition, then you probably wouldn't get any bones you can't identify, versus if it's in really bad condition, or like if it's like multiple different individuals in a grave, or like body parts in a grave, then it might be more difficult to try and determine like what a fragment is and where it came from. Yeah.
So
but like a lot of the times if you're
it's your podcast, you speak.
But like a lot of the times if you're digging like a straightforward grave where it's like one person, head, arms, torso, legs, we bag the bones by like areas, you know, like skull, lower arm, upper arm, ribs, spine. So if something ends up in one of those bags, it at least narrows down like what it could be, so that also helps. It's usually when it's like the grave's pretty messed up, where it's like, I don't know what the hell this is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so basically, like, if it was a bunch of bones dumped into the ground together, then they got crushed by stuff and time and wild animals, potentially. I feel like I've made up the wild animals bit, but then they would be like in little bits. And the little bits would be the bit that you couldn't necessarily identify.
Yeah, so like one of the first projects I worked on was like a bunch of commingled remains. So it would be like there was loads of arms together, like loads of legs together, like they were bodies. They were like bits of bodies. And like then it's difficult to identify them. And those ones are like really, some of them are really messed up. Like you'd get a 10-liter bag of like miscellaneous bones. And then when you get down to the little bits, you're like, I don't know. And I don't know that it matters at this point, that I can't tell you what this is because I just spent like 6 hours trying to identify everything else in this bag.
And those big bags of broken bits of bones that you were getting are the reason that you would we would meet up after work, or you would come over to mine and be like, "I'm sorry, I'm covered in bone dust." So it has happened.
This is a genuine thing. I also, you know what's really funny? I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you. While I was in work, doing that work, I used to listen to, I still do, I listen to true crime podcasts a lot while I'm working. And like sometimes I'd listen to them and they'd be like, yes, and the cadaver dog like smelled out the body. And I'm like, ha 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 ha, funny. I wonder if a cadaver dog would smell me. And then it was like, no, it wouldn't. My bones are like hundreds of years old. And turns out cadaver dogs can smell archaeological bones, and I may be implicated in a crime someday. It wasn't
My God.
me.
No, I feel like you've got a pretty good alibi. Like you just straight up go, this is my job. So there's your explanation. Like, do you have any other
You
evidence
can't
besides the
prove
dog?
they're not old bones.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Exactly. It's the perfect way to get away with crime, to be honest. I am curious, actually, and I don't know if I've asked you this before, but I meant to ask you. You know, clown lung, right? Like when you breathe in so much powder on your face, like because clowns have that makeup powder, that they get like problems with their lungs. And it's called clown lung. I think drag queens get it too, but it's still called clown lung instead of drag lung. I'm not sure why. But could you get like some kind of breathing issues because of the amount of like bone dust that you breathe in, or is that not a concern?
I suppose you could, because it would irritate your lungs the same as like breathing anything that you're not supposed to into your lungs would. We can wear masks if we want to. In that case, I didn't feel like it was necessary because, yes, there was like bone dust everywhere, but it wasn't really like
Hmm.
aerosolizing, I guess. Like it wasn't really in the air a lot. So I didn't feel like it was impacting my breathing at all. But if it was really like in the air or something, we could always just wear like the, like surgical masks if
Mm.
we wanted to. You can't as well, I feel like is important to mention because people ask. To my knowledge, you cannot get a disease from bones. Can't get leprosy from a skeleton with leprosy.
Can't imagine it would. Huh, I never considered that. But I don't think there's any diseases that are transmitted through bone. Like it's usually like viral or bacterial or blood. And there's no blood in the stuff
Yeah,
that you're working with because they're all like really old.
like, technically the bone is dead. So like whatever, I'm not a disease expert, so I don't know how diseases work, but I would presume because the bone's dead, the disease is nothing to live off of anymore. So it,
Hmm.
like it's dead by the time it gets to me. I think you can get some diseases or some kind of exposure if you're dealing with people who've been buried in lead coffins. I know sometimes when they excavate like Victorian cemeteries, they get worried about that, but that's more to do with the lead means that the body decomposes in the coffin and doesn't like seep out of the coffin.
Mm.
So like
Okay.
that's why it's like everything's been trapped in this like sealed environment. That's why I
It
just thought
must
I'd mention that
smell
because people do
really
ask
bad.
me. Oh yeah, I'm sure they do. Like it's full
Oh,
like hazmat gear when they find lead coffins.
those goddamn Victorians, they always ruin everything for everybody. Just, I'm not.
Literally so many books on how weird the Victorians were.
And I want to know more about that as well. But because you were talking about the bones being dead, right? This actually kind of leads into some of the questions that were being asked and questions that I have. So if the bone is dead, because the bones you're working with to be archaeological, it has to be more than 200 years old. Is that what you said? 200.
100 years old. Yes.
100. Okay, I added time. So if the bone is dead, how then do you get DNA from it? Because I know you can in some cases, right? If I made this up.
Why you gotta ask me the science shit? I
But
don't know how it works.
okay.
I think it's because nobody quote me on this, I swear to God. I think it's because essentially what they do is they take a little bit of the bone and then they kind of dissolve it down in like certain kinds of chemicals or whatever, and then they're analyzing that, so it's like on a microscopic level that they've like DNA doesn't have to be in a living thing.
Mhm.
You know, like your blood isn't living, I guess, when it leaves your body, and like hair follicles aren't living. Like people shed hair
Yeah.
all the time because their hair's like not living anymore, but you can still do DNA on that. I'm not entirely sure. I do. I always find this funny, and I feel like I need to say it. I didn't do science for the leaving cert, but I do have a master's of science, and I don't know how that worked. Don't know
You
how that
just
happened.
kind of got away with it. We won't question it. It's fine. But if you guys need to cite this in your papers, it's McGrath
Shut
2024.
up!
Please do
Shut
not
up!
cite this
Do not
ever.
cite me. No. I am really interested in aDNA, which is so we do ancient DNA, so aDNA, not like DNA, because I guess there is a difference. I don't know what it is, but apparently there is one because they're two different names. But I am really interested in aDNA because I know you can use it to see if people had diseases as well. So like diseases that maybe don't show up on bone, or like maybe didn't show up on this person's bones but like can show up on bones and stuff like that. I know you can do aDNA testing and see it from testing the bones, so I do find that interesting, so I do want to learn more about it, but I don't understand any of it nearly at all, despite the fact that I got like second place for a PhD that had to do with like aDNA. I still don't really understand it.
You would have figured it out, and you would have upskilled at that point. It would have been fine, maybe, or you
It
would
was
have just
part of the process was to learn this, so
yeah. So it's good. It's all fine. Right. Next question that I have for you is one that has come up a few times, so I am obliged to ask it to you. Are you ready? It's a tough one. It's a very tough one.
I'm hiking up my pants. Let's go.
What is your favorite bone?
See, this is one I gave you. This is one I should have deleted because I hate having to answer that when people ask me. I'm like, I don't know. I don't have a favorite bone. Do you have a favorite bone? Person who has bones?
The funny bone?
I don't know. I think I'd probably say like any of the bones in the inner ear are the ones that come up when people like come to mind when people ask that, but that's just because like we almost never see them because
Mm.
they're either in the ear canal or they fall out and it's very difficult to spot them because they're tiny. So I think those ones, just because when I see them I'm like, ah, look, I found them, they're so cute.
Well, I have an alternative version of that question, which, my brain just came up with now because I'm so intelligent. Alternatively to what's your favorite bone, what would be a bone, like if you weren't to get a whole skeleton or a partial skeleton, like you've just gotten one bone in digging it up or in a bag or something, whoever's given you this bone, which is one you'd be like, oh, yes, this one.
See, this I actually have an answer to because when I was doing those big bags of miscellaneous bone, that's all I was getting was like one bone. Well, they were big bags of bone, but like you couldn't say that any of them came from the same person. So essentially they were all individual bones. So my answer is the pelvis or the skull. The skull's pretty cool too, but I don't know if you'd count the skull as one bone because there's actually multiple bones in the skull. There's also multiple bones in the pelvis, but the skull's more still multiple bones, whereas the pelvis is not. But either of those, because you can still sort of age and sex someone with just those, especially the pelvis is like one of the better ones for like sexing and aging, so you can still find out a lot with just that one bone.
Okay, so anybody, if you feel like donating a bone to Megan, do not do that. That's weird. Please don't
Are
ever.
you sure that's illegal?
Yeah, probably. Actually, don't send Megan anything. Don't send either of us anything. Here's a
Please
question
don't.
I thought was really interesting, actually, because I wouldn't know. Do certain sports affect bones in different ways? Imagine a universe where I could read properly. That would be insane.
Um, yeah, different activity can affect your bones in different ways. I had to write a paper about this actually when I was in college, so it's kind of difficult to determine to tie it to a certain activity. Like people do try and do that, and you can do that. And one of my colleagues did her PhD on activity related changes with specifically to like how people would have moved because of impairments. So like if they were using crutches and stuff like that, or like the different how they would have altered how they had to walk because of like different disabilities or impairments or stuff like that.
Mm.
So she was studying that, and then other people do like determine that like this area and this area and this area were being used, and given what we know about what was happening in the population at this point, we can say that this person was a basket weaver possibly, or stuff like that. So yeah, different activities or different sports can affect different areas. It can be things like like your muscle attachments, like if you're using certain muscles where they attach to the bone, can make the area like it can show that you were using that particular muscle more often. Also, like different kinds of activities might leave like different kinds of damage or like wear to different areas of the bone as well. So you can kind of, if you look at all of them, maybe get a picture of what people were doing or like how they were moving and stuff like that.
I'm really surprised you can tell like stuff like you mentioned basket weaver. Like I thought it would be something more extreme, like oh yeah, this person played rugby because their kneecaps were destroyed or something. Like I don't know if rugby destroys your kneecaps. I don't play rugby, but stuff like that. This actually really nicely leads into one of the questions I had for you, which is do you think then like the changes in our lifestyles and stuff like current day is going to affect our bones, like what future archaeologists are going to find?
Definitely, and I have actually a really good prime example of this that one of our professors gave us when we were in college, which is the cesarean section.
Mm.
So in the past, if women had like narrow pelvises or like their sacrums were like more curved in, then they'd have problems giving birth. And a lot of the times, like tragically, they would die giving birth. And a lot of the times also their babies would die with them, meaning that genetic narrowing of the pelvis or whatever wouldn't get passed on to the child, because obviously like both of them have died sadly.
Hmm.
But because of cesarean sections, women and their children are living, so the women are going on to have like multiple children, and those children are going on to have children, and like so on and so forth. And so this trait of like a narrow pelvis that kind of should have gotten cut out because it should have led to lower or no births is now being passed down because people aren't, you're not using your pelvis as much. If you're like having a cesarean section, it doesn't really impact on that. And then that also impacts on our ability to sex a skeleton, because a lot of how we sex a skeleton based off of the pelvis is to do with like how the pelvis looks. And like if it's larger and wider, we presume it's a woman, and if it's more narrow, we presume it's a man, and that works in past populations for the most part. But it might not work in the future if this is, this narrow pelvis in women is kind of being passed on more than it would have been in the past.
So presumably then they'll have to come up with some new kind of method. I mean, is it even possible at this point to come up with a new method? Like the skeletons are skeletons and that's kind of it? Like, is this a dumb
Well,
question?
they're always coming up with new methods because they're always coming up with new science. So, like, a lot of
Mm.
the basic or, methods that we use are by, like, looking at the skeleton or, like, measuring the skeleton. And a lot of them are based off of the assumption of like man big, woman small. Like that's a lot of, and for the most part, it works, especially in like archaeological collections. But yeah, because of changes like modern medicine, how we assess them is changing, but that modern science also means that our ability to do it is changing. So like I think with ADNA testing as well, you can test for sex. I know people are trying different methods. I don't look into any of that stuff because I don't use it. But I know people are always trying to come up with new methods or possibly more scientific methods of how to sex or age skeletons versus how we're doing it at the moment, which is like you look at it and you say, this is big, this is big, this is medium, this is big. I think it's a man, kind of thing.
It might actually be a case then, like in the future, that they go, yeah, the methods that they used were really like primitive, rudimentary, sort of.
Yeah, it's one of the problems I have with osteology, like when I'm doing an assessment, is that it is really dependent on the person.
Hmm.
Obviously we all have the same method. We're all reading it from the same book, written by the same person. We're all citing the same sources, but everyone can interpret it a little bit differently. So it's really difficult to be like reading a description in a book and be like, I think this means it's stage 3, which means man. Stuff like that. I find that really difficult as opposed to just like pop something in a machine and it spits out like 95% certain that this is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I much
Yeah.
prefer certainties versus observations.
Mm-hmm.
But I would much prefer a boop 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 machine tell me what the answer is than me being like, I think this is what this book is telling me this is.
I mean, yeah, it would probably be better if you could be like, yes, the computer says it's this. So, like 99% chance, it this. Everybody happy. This actually leads into then another question, which we have, which is, what is your favorite age estimation method?
I saw this one as well. Yeah, so this came from an Instagram post that I had up that was talking about like how we estimate the age of skeletons and stuff, and someone asked this. So I think one of the ones I prefer aging children just that sounds really bad. That sounds really bad, but it's like it's just easier because when you're aging a child, you're aging like you're looking at how the bones are developing. So like what is developed and what isn't, what's fused to, which parts yet. And so like there's very narrow gaps in which like it can be. So you can get within like 2-3 years for like infants and younger, you can get like within a couple of months or a couple of weeks. So they're just more accurate and they're like more concrete because there's not as much that affects that. Versus when you're looking at adults, you're looking at how the bone is degrading, and that's less consistent and can be impacted by like different things. So it's harder to do. So in general, I prefer using any method to age a child because it's just easier to do and more accurate and more satisfying when you can be like between 6 and 8 because that's a nice
Mm-hmm.
number versus like between 45 and 60 for adults.
Big age range there.
But yeah, I think one of the ones I prefer for adults though is using the teeth, but you can only use those in like very specific circumstances. So you can't use those ones all the time. You can only use it on like very specific population types from Britain. But there's also a method where there's like a computer program you can use where you input the like answers to different methods. So like you use different methods and then you input them on the computer and it sort of generates a result based on what researchers have previously told the computer is like the statistically better methods. So, like it weighs them out and then like tells you we're 95% certain it's a woman because this method said woman and that method's more reliable than this other method that said man. So I don't know how the computer thing works. It gives you a pretty graph and an answer. And I do not understand the graph, but I understand the answer. So I like that one.
We like answers, we like graphs, we like pretty things, so everybody's happy. It was also like really interesting for me when we went to the catacombs, which you talked about in another episode, right? I haven't watched that
Mm-hmm.
one yet. I'm sorry, I'm a fake fan. No, I will watch it. I've been busy these last 2 weeks. But yeah, we went to the catacombs and then you were able to be like, yeah, this one was potentially like a kid and stuff, which I was like, whoa, you're so smart. You know things about as if it's not your whole job. And I'm like, whoa, how do you know this?
It's the same with anything. It's the same with you when you talk about your job, or like Sky when she talks about her job, and I'm just like, wow, you big brain. How you do this? How you know? Big brain.
Well, maybe not big brain when I say stuff, but like, why do you know this might be more accurate. Like, why is this
No
information
question
you
why
have?
I know things.
True. I mean, I was saying to, I think, who was I saying? It doesn't matter who I said this to. I was like, oh yeah, the catacombs are great. Megan was disappointed with the lack of syphilis. And it's like, these are things that
There is syphilis in the catacombs. I found it in the research, but I couldn't see any, and now I'm disappointed.
we have to go back. Oh, more pastries. Terrible.
Or
We can always go again. It's fine. Let me get back into my questions here, although I seem to have closed them. For some reason, I'm a professional. This question I wanted to ask you because I don't know what this is, and maybe you do. Have you heard of Indiana Bones, the museum cat?
no, now I feel like I'm missing out. I need to look this up. Hang on. I'm
Okay.
looking this up.
I want to know. Sorry, my eyes just, while you're typing there, my eyes flew up to one of the other questions, which I wasn't going to ask you because why would I ask you this? But somebody did ask, do you ever want to eat the bones? I'm assuming the answer is no.
No, but when I
God.
was in college, so there is this thing, I've never done it, but there's this thing that if you're confused about whether something is bone or stone, if you lick it, bone sticks to your tongue and stone doesn't, because bone's more porosic, it's got more porosity in it than stones do. But I swear one of my professors in college told me that if you lick bone, like if you're confused about if something is animal or human bone and you lick it, human bone sticks or animal, one of them sticks and the other one doesn't. I swear a professor told me that, but that's not a thing because they're both bone. And
Can
like, yes,
we
they're different kinds of bone, but like, I think they would both still stick.
can we just clarify that you do not go around licking the bones?
Never licked a bone. One of my supervisors did used to tap things against your teeth before, but that's like more of a sound thing than like a licking thing.
Does it have to
I
be
have
your
never
teeth?
put a bone in my mouth, near my mouth, at all.
Okay, yeah, please
Intentionally.
don't. I do want to ask you because Victorians ate mummies and stuff, right? Did they eat bones?
I think they used to use bone powder for different things. They did used to eat
Mm-hmm.
mummies as well. The Victorians be weird. But yeah, I think they used to use bone powder for different things. I don't know if they ate it, but I know that they like use it to like coagulate like blood in like injuries and stuff, and it worked. But using sawdust also would have worked. There was nothing
So they
magical about using
didn't need
bone.
to use the bones. Surely sawdust would have been cheaper as well.
I think it was like they thought the bone had like some kind of magical property to like heal your wounds or something, and it's just a case of like anything that would have made the blood like solidify, like sawdust or like any kind of dusty thing would have worked.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Did you
I've looked
find an
up
answer on?
Indiana.
Yeah.
I've looked it up. So apparently it's a cat. Hang on. He's got a whole page. He's introducing himself. Hi, I'm Sir Indiana Bones. Feel free to call me Indy. Okay, good to know. I think he's in the Skeleton Museum of Osteology. I don't know where that is.
Is he just like a mascot or
Oklahoma. Oklahoma City. I guess he lives in the museum. I
that's
now have to
adorable.
visit this museum. He's a cute black cat, which seems on theme.
That is really I feel like that's not possible for a day trip, sadly. But we
Oklahoma?
can go there.
No.
Yeah. You
Is
have
it
to bring
anywhere
me. I
near
want to go there.
Indianapolis? Because I'll be there next year.
Which is in which state again? Remind me.
I don't know. Why are you asking me?
Because you're going there. I thought you knew. It's
Oh,
in one
jack
of
shit.
them.
I had to look it up on a map. I still don't really know where it is.
That's fine. I always Indianapolis sounds made up anyway. Everybody who's watching this from Indianapolis is like, hey, it's not made up. I live here. But somebody asked this and I thought it was great. Do you think there is an underappreciated or overlooked bone.
I'm just confused more than anything. I don't know what that means.
Just think
What
there's a
does that
bone that's
mean?
being underappreciated in the field. Like people look at it and they go, ugh, that bone, but it's actually kind of cool.
I don't know. I'm probably gonna get killed by like some researcher of sesamoid bones or something to be like, everybody overlooks the damn sesamoid. I don't know.
What is a sesamoid bone? That sounds made up. You've made that up.
It's like a type of bone, but there are also like bones that are called sesamoids that are like in your hands and your feet. They're just like little, rarely find them. I don't know what the purpose of them is. I'm very ignorant about sesamoids. I apologize to all the sesamoid researchers out there. I failed you. I don't even know if that's a
Rise
thing.
up, sesamoid fans! I'm definitely a sesamoid fan, for sure. Just, I like how it sounds coming out of my mouth because it sounds like not a real word. What about the ear bone then? Because you mentioned that earlier. Surely that's underappreciated.
Yeah, I suppose because you don't find them a lot. So I think you might be able to use them to study something about ear diseases or maybe deafness. I don't know. I don't know anything about that. Don't quote me. But I mean, yeah, I'm sure it's under research because we don't find them very often, but I don't know about underappreciated because we don't find them. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't find something, I feel like people are more like, what could we do with it if we had
Mm.
more?
Hmm.
I guess I'm sure there's bones out there that like people do research and say, like, oh, if people looked at like kneecaps more, like maybe we'd know more about different things or, but
Hmm.
I don't know because I don't research that.
Is the kneecap a bone?
It's called the patella and it is a bone.
But the elbow is
It is
not
a
a bone.
sesamoid bone, actually.
Sesamoid gang! I'm so happy with this
Rise up!
information now. I absolutely love a sesamoid. Like, nothing better than like a whopper sesamoid.
It's
Which,
also one of the bones that doesn't exist in children. It's technically cartilage in children, and then it becomes, if cartilage fuses together and ossifies, it becomes a bone.
yeah, I might have spoiled your answer then for the next question, which is what is the most obscure thing you know about bones?
That's the
That,
one I whip out because it disturbs people to be like, I'm sorry, children don't have kneecaps.
yeah, I don't like
But
that.
yeah, I mean, technically you have kneecaps. They're just like cartilage. They're not bone. And they're like little bits of cartilage. They're not like a fully formed thing yet. But it's cooler to say kids don't have kneecaps. I'm not sure if that's the most obscure thing I know, but it is the one that like I whip out when people ask me to like tell them a fact about bones. I
Hmm.
don't know what I would call like it's difficult for me to determine what is an obscure fact about bones because like I don't have a normal baseline anymore.
Fair. Fair enough. Okay. Um, so this is a question from Instagram. What's something we should know when looking at bones medically that we aren't told? This might be a difficult one to answer because you are not a doctor. You deal with very dead people.
Very dead people. I would be interested in dealing with less dead people, like as in forensically dead people, not archaeologically dead. That came out wrong. No, I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
a
that just made it
doctor.
sound like you want to like chop people up and look at their bones. I'm gonna be honest with you, May.
um, I don't really. What should we look at medically that we don't? I don't really know. See, this is the funny thing about bones and like when it comes to studying things in the past that's kind of difficult is because we see things on bones that even in modern people you might never see like in that person. Do you know what I mean? Like there's like I have a problem with my spine and it causes some back pain, so I ended up having an MRI and you can see it on the MRI. But the thing I have, other people could have it and it wouldn't cause pain and they'd never know that it existed because it's not causing anything. So like you wouldn't be sent for an MRI, so you wouldn't therefore see it. So there are like a lot of things about bones that like if they don't affect you in your life, like nobody knows they exist, and then because they don't know they exist, like when we find them archaeologically, we're like, is this important or is this just weird? Like
Mhm.
impossible to know.
Mhm.
So there's that. But Yeah, I don't really know if there's like things that we should know about bones that we don't. I don't know.
Which
Not a
reminds me
doctor.
that there were so many questions asking, why do my bones hurt? Is it normal that my bones click? All of this stuff. Let us remind you, Megan work with very dead people. Not doctor. Ask your doctor. I mean, I'm sure you
Please
can
go
ask.
to a licensed medical professional and ask them. Because I
Yes.
don't know jack shit about living people. If you can talk to me, don't. Because I can't look at your bones.
I think one of the most interesting things that I've learned from you, because you, I mean, deal with very dead people, as we have said multiple times, is the way you can see disease and stuff, which is quite a lot of what you do in like your masters and stuff. You can correct. This is not a question. I'm just talking, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I've completely misunderstood everything you've been trying to tell me the last several years. But is that like you can only see disease on a bone once, like, and not even all diseases obviously, but like once it's really far gone, like they would have had to have progressed a lot and lived with that disease for a while for it to actually affect the bones, right?
Yeah, so if you take my old favorite syphilis, for example, syphilis only affects the bones in the tertiary stage, so in the third stage of syphilis. And even then, it doesn't always affect the bone in the third stage. So you can have someone who lived with syphilis and had syphilis and it progressed into the third stage of syphilis, and you'd never see any signs of it in their bone. You could do ADNA testing and you might see signs of it there, but like me looking at the bones, I couldn't tell you that person had syphilis. And similarly, you could get someone with stage 1 or stage 2 syphilis, and I wouldn't be able to tell you because it doesn't show up on their bones. So yeah, you can only see certain diseases when they've progressed far and when the person's had that disease for a while.
Hmm.
When it starts to affect the bone. The bone is usually the last thing to be affected in a disease like progression. It's the like one of the last things to be affected. And again, it's not always affected. It depends on the person. So it's kind of an opposite thing of like you would think when we see diseased skeletons, it means really unhealthy person. But in reality, it could mean that that person was actually quite healthy because they lived with the disease long enough for it to start affecting their bones. Like they lived with leprosy or tuberculosis or syphilis for years until it affected their bones, versus someone who was really unhealthy and had one of those diseases might have died in the early stages and it wouldn't have affected their bones at all. But you could also get like trauma and stuff like that. That is immediate. Like that would affect the bone
Hmm.
immediately. Any trauma that hits the bone would affect it immediately. You could see trauma like in someone who just died. You could see trauma that's healed. Like that's the one kind of exception to that. But diseases, usually it's the last stage of a disease that affects the bones.
Which I'm kind of curious then, because I assume not all diseases could be seen in the bone. So, like, what are some that can be seen and some that can't?
So yeah, like leprosy, tuberculosis, syphilis, scurvy, different kinds of diseases associated with like lack of nutrition and stuff like vitamin D, like rickets, residual rickets in adults. Those you can see in the bones. Pretty much any disease that's fast acting, you don't see in the bones. So, like a modern example, you wouldn't see COVID on bones because if it was going to kill someone, it kills them quite quickly. And then like I think cholera, you don't see that in the bones. You can see it in the ADNA, but you don't see it like on the actual bones. So pretty much like any viral disease that would kill people like in a couple of weeks, you wouldn't see that on the bones. See,
Hmm.
it depends on like the longevity of the disease kind of thing.
What about things though, like different forms of cancer? Obviously, like there's bone cancers, so I don't mean them. I mean ones that are unrelated and say somebody lived with it for like 10, 15, 20 years before it eventually killed them. Like, I can't think of an example because I'm not a doctor and I don't know which cancers are likely to kill you after that long, but like breast cancer or skin cancer, brain cancer, stuff like that.
Yeah, so obviously I'm not a doctor, but from my
Mhm.
understanding, very, very basic understanding of cancer, not from an osteology point of view, just from a like general public point of view. From what I understand of cancer, when it becomes fatal is when it starts to spread from like an initial cancerous source. So like someone getting, you could have breast cancer and then it would get like, it would spread and it would get into your bones. So like then you would have a form of bone cancer, but it would initially have started with breast cancer and therefore would still be called breast cancer. You'd say someone died of breast cancer, but in reality it's probably that the cancer spread like to everywhere and then killed them, I think is how that works. So yeah, you can see certain types of bone cancers, obviously, like tumors and stuff like on the bones. But you can, I suppose, you could also see if someone had a tumor, like cancerous or non-cancerous, any kind of tumor that was like pressing up against a bone for a long period of time, it would cause a mark in the bone or like an indentation, like where that was. So more specific, like the ones I would see more often would be like inside the skull if somebody had like a brain tumor
Mhm.
or like a brain, yeah, any kind of like brain growth that wasn't supposed to be there. You might see like at the cap of the skull where it started to indent where something was pushing up against it for like a long period of time.
Mhm. So basically, it needs to be something that is directly affecting the bone in some way, either like next to it or in it, or okay, that makes sense. But I just wasn't sure, and I know it's maybe a silly question to people who know, but I'm here to ask the silly questions that people want to know.
That's, yeah, that's the whole reason you're there. And also, like, I don't study cancer. I don't know that I've ever seen any kind of cancer in a bone, so I can't say for certain. This is like going back to my school days to be like, what was that one lecture we had on like
Hmm.
osteoclasts and osteoblasts and like all of that stuff?
Hmm. I would like, because you've talked about sorry, I said this like it was related. This is completely unrelated. I want to hear you talk more about Neanderthals at some point. You don't have to go into it now, but just I find it fascinating, and like I feel so bad for them, like we did them so dirty, because this is something you talked about as well, I think, unless I'm remembering wrong, in which case correct me, which is that Neanderthals like likely didn't look like what we think they look like. The issue was that they just got a load of random bones from different individuals and put them together on display. Is that correct?
Yeah, so like with any sort of pre-Homo sapien, you know, individual, like our ancestral individual kind of things, a lot of them are based off of like scraps of bones that they've like put together from different people, and they're saying like this is what they look like. Like there's nothing else they can do. That like that's what they have to do, so that's what they do. But like there's everyone's skeleton looks different and some people's skeletons look like weirdly different, but it doesn't make them not a Homo sapien or Homo sapien sapien or whatever we are. It just means that like everyone's skeletons like look completely different. Like I have something weird with my spine, but that's me. I was just born that way. So
Hmm.
when you commingle like different bits of bones, especially when they only have like one or two examples of like this kind of like, I don't know, Homo something or other, and then it gets difficult to be like, is that what they all look like, or is that one person just like have a really weird forehead, or something like that. I think with
Hmm.
Neanderthals, it's a little more concrete because I think they have more examples of skeletons, so therefore it's easier to be like, okay, this trait is common amongst almost all the examples we have, so we can say for certain that that trait, like the wide forehead or whatever, like that's common of Neanderthals because that's in like all the skeletons we've seen, versus like this person's got weird looking, I don't know, hands or something, but that's just because that person had weird looking hands, something like that. But
Hmm.
that's a problem with all of them, and there's not really anything you could do to fix that. It's just how that works with a lot of skeletons. But I know there are problems with like how people view Neanderthals. One of the girls when I was doing my master's was doing hers on Neanderthals, and specifically on like how they made tools and stuff like that. So not their bones. She was an archaeologist, not an osteologist. but she was talking a lot about like how racially charged a lot of the research initially was when they were researching Neanderthals. And I do believe that the kind of stereotypical vision we have of Neanderthals is these like hunched over, like kind of ape like creatures. The thought we have of that is inaccurate and based off of like racially charged stuff, and also like, skeletons of like elderly Neanderthals who had like problems with their skeletons anyway, but they were just like, no, all Neanderthals like walked like apes and were really stupid and, you know, like looked like this or whatever. I think.
Yeah,
I
which
don't
also
study
you
that. I
can't.
don't.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know this isn't your area of expertise. I just find it fascinating, and you would know more than I do. But yeah, you can't like tell that somebody was stupid from their bones, right? Like, so saying like, yeah, Neanderthals were stupid seems a bit stupid because you don't know because you don't like looking at their skeletons. It's not like, yep, that's a dumb skeleton. That's definitely an idiot. Good job. They're gonna say that about me.
Honestly, I think we've gotten stupider over the millennia.
Feel like it, like the more easy things get for us, the less we have to use our brains, shockingly. But Neanderthal rights, that's what I think. They were probably way smarter
Viva
than us.
Neanderthal!
I love, and that is so going to be your merch. It has to be. Please make it. I will buy all of the merch if you have "We Love Neanderthal"
Neanderthal
merch.
rights.
Take our Neanderthals.
Stand with Neanderthals.
Yes.
Oh.
I have a question here from your viewers, which is, what is your dream place to dig?
Okay, complicated question. So, if we're talking like in the past, like knowing what we know now about a site, like if I could go back and be like, I want to dig Herculaneum in like the 1990s when they found all the skeletons, or I want to dig Chadlahoyuk back when people from Turkey were digging Chadlahoyuk. You know, like if I could do that and not be problematic, I'd want to do that because those are like really interesting discoveries I want to be a part of. In general, I'd be interested in digging skeletons from like ancient Rome or ancient Greece because I also have a degree in classics. So if I could like merge the two of those together, that would be cool, but also problematic because that's not my culture. This is the problem. I actually am not fascinated at all by Irish culture. We're really boring. And I'd rather dig like anything else. I'm sorry.
Very controversial take.
I find our history very boring. I'm really only interested in like Victorian Ireland and like famine Ireland. Like real shit time for Ireland when we were British. That's when I care about Ireland. And not because we were a part of the UK, but just because of weird shit was happening then.
I think you are grossly misinformed. We have such an interesting history. Just, I feel like there's not enough research done into our history. But it is. Oh, yeah,
That's
no,
true.
you're wrong. You're objectively wrong.
I understand why people are interested in Irish history. Like, I get it. It's just not my interest. So, like, that's why I don't want to dig any of that. I do
You
have
are
a
wrong.
particular site. I have a particular site in Ireland in mind that I would want to work on, but I feel like it's very inappropriate to call it a dream place to dig. But I wanna dig a tomb when they start digging there. I want to work on
Just
that. I think
explain
that'd be
for like
interesting.
people who don't know what that is.
Okay, very basic description. It was the site of a mother and baby home back in, I believe it was 2000. It was either like 2006, 2016. It was a while ago. They excavated the area because the mortality records for the site weren't for the mother and baby home weren't adding up properly, and people were convinced that they had buried additional children at the site without recording them properly, and it turned out they did, and that a lot of them were like in very like they were in the septic tanks and they were like at surface level, and they were just there was some really shady stuff going on there. That was just a text excavation to kind of prove that there was something weird going on, and then a lot of the laws and stuff in Ireland have now changed, so they are talking about going back next year or the year after, and like properly excavating the site, because the family members of people who were there, the mothers of children who died there, want DNA testing done on them to bring their babies home and give them proper burials. So that's why I feel like it's inappropriate to say that's a dream excavation, because it's
Mm-hmm.
very sad and it's very modern, and it's very much still in the living memory of Ireland, as much as different people try and bury it. But I think it's very important work, and it's the kind of thing where I don't want to work in criminal forensics, because I just I don't have the mental stability or strength or confidence to do that. But this is something I feel like would be very impactful, that I do feel like I could work on. And so, yeah, that was my very
Mm-hmm.
basic description. But yes,
Yeah, that
I
makes
think that
sense.
would be very impactful to work on. So that's why I'd say, like, if I could work on that in some capacity, any capacity, it doesn't have to be digging, it could be like post-ex, or even just like, I don't know, administrative, like in any kind of way, I'd be interested in helping out on that.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. I think it would be very, very important work and also very interesting. Like it is something that is still we're still learning about, and it is very close to us as a, I mean, not close to me, obviously, but close to our society as a whole. So I think it would be interesting. So if you ever do that, let me know. Let people know if there's no confidentiality thing. There probably would be.
There
But
would be. There would be paparazzi and like magazines and like people trying to get, like, it's happened before. People have excavated like newsworthy things before, and they've ended up with photographers standing on cars trying to get photos like over the hoarding and
weird.
everything. Yeah, I've had
That's
colleagues like
bizarre.
where they leave work and they're getting photographed, and they're like, this is not what I signed up for. I'm an archaeologist,
No.
not a celebrity. This is weird.
Yeah, no, that is bizarre. But just I hate the paparazzi in any capacity anyway. Like fuck you guys. But I have a final question for you anyway, which is
Yes.
it's a very basic one, but I didn't want to like close this off without asking this. So you probably have people listening who are considering or interested in going into this kind of field. So do you have just generally any kind of advice, anything you think they should know, anything like that?
It's an oversaturated market, and don't do it if you want a job. Go into zoo archaeology. Study animal bones. We need more animal bone experts. If
Hmm.
you want a job, if you're genuinely interested, it is an interesting thing to study. The reason I like osteology so much is because I like getting more, like, simultaneously both a person level look at archaeology, and then also like a population level look at the same time. So I can look at a collection of skeletons, and I can tell you the story of this one person who like might have had a disability, and I can tell you, like, not tell you, but I can try and interpret how their lives would have looked, how they might have lived. And then at the same time I can also tell you, or try and interpret, what their population as a whole would have been like, or what was going on. So that's why I like osteology so much. That's why I wanted to study it. But for anyone who does want to study it, just like keep in mind, at the moment there are more osteologists than there are jobs. So you might not end up doing any research, or, working as an osteologist. But I mean, it doesn't hurt to have it, in your back pocket. You can always do general archaeology, and also just do it. But it is a really, I encourage people to study it if you want to, but just keep in mind that there's not a lot of jobs in it, if that's something you're concerned about. Go in a zoo
Yeah, that
arc.
is good.
Apparently we need more zoo arcs.
See, there's everybody now. That is your new career path. You're welcome. And also
For the next
citation.
like 2 years, and then all the zoo arcs graduate, we've got problems again. Then go
Yeah,
into
but then there'll
prehistoric
be
pottery in
space.
Ireland, because we've got none of those.
Really? Okay, I'll do that one then, because so easy to just go and do an archaeology degree for no reason. That was all of the questions I had to.
Yay! I do have a little. Well, there's three things I want to read out, because I got lots of comments on YouTube that were lovely, very lovely comments. Someone told me that they watched the podcast with their mom, and I was like, stop, not in the field, not with your mom.
That's lovely.
And then other people were like, you've got a shit microphone. And I'm like, bitch, I know. You don't need to point that out. I hear it too. But I just wanted to read out, I did get a review on Apple Podcasts.
Ooh.
That
wow.
I feel like sums up what I was trying to get across with the podcast. So that was fun. So I just wanted to read that out. And it was titled Cozy, Creepy, and Kooky. 5 stars. And I'm like, tell me more. But this person said, I know, it's great. This person was like, I really enjoy listening to this podcast. The storytelling flows for a very cozy listen while being very in-depthly researched and factual. So, thank you, because that's like
glowing
exactly
reviews.
what I was aiming for. And then there was also
I think you have done very well.
There was also 2 comments I wanted to read out about previous episodes, just because I feel like they kind of add like a little bit of more context to some of the episodes as well. So I just wanted to read those out. So this comment is from the episode I did about the quote unquote real Indiana Jones and about whether he faked his death or not. So this person commented, I don't think the wife was involved. I suspect she thought he had ended his life, and because of the time, she wouldn't have said that. I just don't know. Could be by his hand, and that is more so where I lean. Where did the boat go? And doing a DNA test could show relatives somewhere else in the world, but he could have. But he would have to remarry, and as a gay man, that might not have been something he did. And again, being gay at the time, anywhere was seen as a problem. I thought this one was interesting. Someone thought that he might have killed himself and that his wife just didn't say anything because of the culture of the time, which definitely makes sense. But I more wanted to comment on the DNA thing because I feel like this is something people always bring up when it comes to like archaeology or like historical things, but they're just like, do the DNA thing, do the DNA and then the NBA thing. Based on what?
Mm.
Like, because it's the same thing when they find bones and they think they might be certain people. Like when they thought they might have found Anne Boleyn's head, and it's like, do the DNA, and I'm like, and compare it to what?
Mm-hmm. You need to have that information.
Something. You could DNA test the entire population, but unless you know what Arthur Kingsley Porter's DNA was, it doesn't help because it doesn't.
Yeah, you can be like,
to be fair, he has a great nephew, so if you're sure that the great nephew is biologically related to him, you could do that. I think they did end up confirming that one of the heads was Anne Boleyn's because she has living descendants, but like that's a whole process, as a whole thing. That is a whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the further back you go, the more complicated it gets because you're hoping that everyone was telling the truth about whose kid was whose, which
yeah.
Before DNA testing was uncertain. Anyone who's married, their son is their son, like their child is their child. Like you'd say that unless you had solid evidence. I appreciated that comment and I loved the interaction, but I also thought it was funny because I was like, DNA test who? And compared to who? Are we DNA testing the entire population of the world? Like I don't. So that one was just funny. And then I had another comment on the episode about St. Valentine's bones that I also wanted to mention because this one was interesting and I didn't know. So someone was saying, now having clapped eyes on a saint's relic, I searched to see if Oz had any kicking about, and yes, we have a few permanent bits, but we are deeply blessed with being on the frequent flyers visit list. Saints bits and bobs seem to be on an almost constant tour all over the shop, like a mad woman's washing. I'd check their carbon footprint if I were them. Thanks for a great episode. So, I didn't realise that Saints' body parts do tours around the world, but apparently they do. So I thought that was
fantastic.
I didn't mention it.
You know, you're gonna have to go to one of those tours at some point. You realize this.
You should be like, oh, let's go. I do need to go to Dublin and see the Valentine's bits that we have. The St. Valentine's bits that we have. Day trip. Yeah, we don't have to leave the country this time.
Yeah. Still probably the same price. Let's be real.
Yeah. Oh, it's Dublin. Of course, it would be more expensive than going to Paris for the day.
Yeah, basically. We can't get the £6 wine.
That's me. So there was also one other thing I wanted to do, because I find this shit interesting, and I'm sure nobody else does, which is why I'm putting it towards the end, so that hopefully I've retained some people up until this point. You can all leave now. Bye. So
Don't
I
leave.
find don't leave. Skip. Don't leave. Skip. I find analytics interesting, and I find other people's analytics interesting. And I find my analytics interesting because I don't understand some of them. So I thought I'd read out some interesting facts about our listeners or viewers.
Yes.
So most people watch on YouTube, obviously. And after that, people listen on Apple and Spotify, and then there's miscellaneous things after that, including like Alexa is a category. Understand how Alexa is a category of podcast service, but it is.
Sure.
But that was included. And web browser is also a category, which I'm but you're listening, like, are you listening on Spotify on a web browser? Like, I don't understand why you're giving me web browser.
Just web browser.
It's a category. But whatever. And so based off of these three, I only looked at these three because I'm not fucking searching web browser. I don't know what that means. But based off of these three, we have listeners in the USA, the UK, Canada, Ireland, Australia, Germany, Poland, Brazil, Finland, New Zealand, Spain, Denmark, Republic of Moldova, Sweden, Portugal, Netherlands, Russia, Georgia, Turkey, Mexico, South Africa, Belgium, Vietnam, Italy, and Greece.
Wow.
I'm confused about many of these.
Just go with it. Be happy. It's fine.
Just go with it. The two biggest cities are New York and Dublin. Representing. Go, Ireland. Most of my listeners or viewers are aged between 25 and 34, though I do have some listeners that are 60 plus. So shout out to my 60 plus listeners.
Favorite listeners.
Obviously. Most of my listeners are female at 80 to 85%. Nice job, ladies.
We love ladies.
I also have 5.3% non-binary listeners, which I didn't realize Spotify had a category for non-binary, but they do. So that's interesting.
And hello,
and that's my weird analytical breakdown of this season.
I enjoyed that, actually. I thought that was interesting. I don't know if anybody else liked that, but I did.
You can now tune
Shout
back
out
in.
to all of them. Shout out to all the people that we just mentioned. I say we like I did anything except for sit here and go,
I did interesting that there's no one from France, considering I did an episode on Paris. What the hell?
They like to pretend they don't speak English. I'm joking. I'm joking.
Actually, in my experience, people in Paris, like anywhere else in France, they'll be happy to, play along with you trying to speak French. In Paris, they're just like, my English is better than your French. Just shut up. Just let me
And you
speak
know what?
in
They're
English.
probably right, in fairness to them.
No, they deserve it because they deal with stupid tourists all day long, so they can be as abrupt with me as they want to be. I stand for hospitality servicers' rights.
Yeah, exactly. And also Neanderthals.
Neanderthals and hospitality workers. These are the two groups we support.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think.
Did you forget this was your podcast?
I forgot I was in charge. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have anything to add.
No, I didn't want to interrupt. I was like, this is your flow. You do flow. I'm going to sit back.
I did actually have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
I had like two questions for you because I know you listen to every episode of my podcast. So you've obviously listened to the episode that came out like 2 hours ago. It was all about Halloween. But I just wanted to ask you, because this episode's coming out on Halloween, do you have any happy Halloween memories or like traditions that you do for like Halloween or anything like that?
Oh my god, all my happy, like, I'm not saying this just to like, sorry to be obscure, but to like lick your asshole because I'm on your podcast. But like all of my happiest Halloween memories are like hanging out with you and with Sky and stuff. Like when we were kids, it was just the best. And I do like one of my most vivid Halloween memories is the time that was it me and you or me and Sky? Me and one of you were convinced that we were seeing UFOs.
Because you and Sky, and I was the weirdly like down to earth one in that moment, which is normally Sky's job.
Yeah, being like, oh my god, it's UFOs. They're just like straight up lanterns. It's Halloween. Get it together.
So funny about that was like we saw one and they were like, oh my god, it's a UFO, and I was like, hey, it could be, but like let's calm down. It could also be something else. Like I was not pooping on their parade. Like I said it could be a possibility. And then they saw another one, and they were like, oh my god, it's the second UFO. And then they saw like 5 more, and they were like, oh my god, we're being invaded! And I was like, it's fucking lanterns, you twats.
I will
They
say,
just kept adding to this alien thing instead of like,
yeah,
it
instead
just
of like being
snowballed.
normal. Yeah. Well, I can't say that I have any traditions I haven't really celebrated in recent years, mostly because we haven't hung out, so that just makes me sad, and I'm like, Halloween is disappointing now. But yeah,
This year, okay? We're going
yeah,
to a
we are.
lecture because we're intellectual.
Yeah, I still find it slightly weird that this lecture is on Halloween. It feels slightly gimmicky, but I'm interested in it anyway. So,
Sure,
but
I was like touring and it just like landed on Halloween
yeah.
in Dublin.
No, it is like a tour thing that's happening. But yes, we're going to a lecture this Halloween, so maybe this will be our new tradition.
Yeah, find something fun to do and go to it, because like I like the idea of like a costume party or something, but not on
Hmm.
Halloween because I feel like that's just asking for trouble.
And it's always like on a weekday. Like not always, but
It's on a
5 times out of
Thursday.
7, it's on a weekday. So like, come on, I have work the
Yeah,
next day. Leave me
I know
alone.
it's on Thursday this year, which like I guess you could call it Sick Friday, but I don't have my new
Yeah,
boss's
but
number, so I can't do that.
and also you've said it
First world
now, so it would
problems.
be kind of
I
an
know.
issue.
I know. Well, we're not. We're going to a lecture. We're not going to a party. So I got no
Yeah, no, we
excuses.
won't.
I still got to show up.
Yeah, we won't be out late. We'll be at home by a reasonable, respectful time.
Like the
Woo!
old ladies we are.
Exactly. Geriatric, basically.
My bones creak. I'm fully old. I believe I am a 60-year-old lady.
Well, just go take your skeleton out, check it. You can age it yourself, and then you'll know.
Just pop it back in.
Yeah, that's how it works, right? I learned from this podcast. That's how it works.
Yeah, I just pull the bones out and then put them back in again. I think we're gonna end this here because it's going off the rails and neither of us have eaten yet.
Yeah, we're both starving. My stomach has been growling, but this platform has noise cancellation. Woo!
Okay, so thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Eva, for entertaining me this evening with these questions and entertaining my weird requests in the middle of the weekend to be like, hey, can you record like before Halloween? Which is like
No, I
in 4
enjoyed
days.
this.
So it's for the short notice.
No, this was fun. I'm glad you asked me to do this because I enjoy this kind of stuff.
Okay, perfect. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Eva. You can check Eva out at VangelinaSkov on YouTube and Instagram and it's all the same, all the places, isn't it?
Yeah, same everywhere.
Okay. She is much better at this whole YouTube thing than I am, so like go
That's
check out how a
questionable.
professional does it.
I don't agree with that at all.
You get paid. That's literally the definition of professional. You get
If
paid
I
to do
gave you a
the
fiver
thing.
right now, you would be paid.
Hey, if
No.
anybody wants to support me, you can buy me a coffee. I'm kidding. I do have a buy me a coffee, but I can't remember how to log into it.
Somebody
Oops.
buy her a coffee so she can be a professional and she can
To
not
be a
call me one.
professional, shitty
Yeah.
podcaster.
Great podcaster, excellent podcast. Love this podcast, favorite podcast.
Great endorsing note. I'm gonna say goodbye. Eva, say goodbye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.